Welcome back to the Rami Lavi podcast. Quick episode I wanted to do here to talk about football for a second because there are three football points I wanted to make as we approach week 8 of the NFL season. Now, I ranted and raved, and I'm not going to do it on my Jets podcast because I just need a mental health break from the Jets. I ranted about the Jets, and I'm like, it's not even apathetic anymore. Like I keep saying I'm apathetic about the Jets. I'm not. I hate the team. Like I hate them. So it's worse than apathetic. Like apathy would be fine. I just didn't care about them. I actually hate them. And now what they did today was even worse. They raised season ticket prices again, and they're moving up the date of when you have to pay again. I am so glad I gave up my season tickets last year because they keep raising the prices year after year with this dog shit effort. They're 2-5, and they're raising season ticket prices. At least last year they were 4-3. My God, this is abnormal. But enough about the Jets. I don't even want to talk about them. They just make me infuriated. Let's talk about the Giants for a second. The New York Giants. I developed a thought about the New York Giants because when I watch them every week, and I talked about this before, Daniel Jones, when there's 3, 4 plays to be made a game, he doesn't make them. And when he does, they win. And when he doesn't, they don't win. But I hear the discourse on WFAN. Well, we like Daboll, we like Shane. Are they going to get an opportunity to draft another quarterback? And the more we get into it, I just feel like if they are good enough and they win enough games to keep Daboll and Shane around, Daniel Jones will have to play well. And if Daniel Jones plays well enough to keep Daboll and Shane around and they win 7 to 9 games, Daniel Jones is going to be the quarterback next year because he's going to have to play well in order for them to win that number of games. And if he plays well, he's under contract for 2 more years. Why would you get rid of him? You're going to go draft another quarterback and then wait for him to develop and go through that process. You don't have that kind of time, Brian Daboll and Joe Shane. You're in such a tough position where you should have been drafting the quarterback this past year, but you had too good a record because you won games with Tommy DeVito, Tommy Cutlets. I think Daboll and Jones are so tied at the hip. They're so tied together that if Daniel Jones completely bottoms out and he sucks, which I think is certainly possible, and we're seeing it the last couple of weeks, I think how can you justify keeping Daboll, especially the way he started and where he's gone is he went all the way up his first year as head coach, and now the crash he's come down to. I don't see how you could keep him if Daniel Jones sucks so bad that the Giants are just a 4-win team this year, a 5-win team this year. But if they're a 9-win team, how can you move on from Daniel Jones? So my point is that no matter where you go, I think they're tied at the hip. And so if you like Daboll and Shane and you want them to stick around, you better get used to rooting for Daniel Jones because I really think they're tied together, these two. And it's not a good spot for the Giants to be in because I think they are so tethered to each other. It's dangerous for the Giants, for their fans, because you may hate Daniel Jones and say he's a bad quarterback, but Daboll and Shane, we want them to stay. And I'd agree with you on that. I think Daboll and Shane should stay. And if they get fired from the Giants, I'd grab them as a Jets fan right away. Just go hire those two. Okay, infrastructure there, done. Don't touch anything, Woody Johnson. Go fly to London and not deal with us anymore. Daboll and Shane, you guys run the franchise. That's what I would do. Draft a young quarterback, all that. That's literally what I would do. So I think they're great. But I think they're so deep down the Daniel Jones road, those two, that now in this season where you pay Daniel Jones and you had the season that you had that was okay last year, if you bottom out, you just have an awful season this year, how can you justify keeping them? And unfortunately, if Daniel Jones is good enough where you don't have a bottoming out season, where you actually win 8 or 9 games, how can you justify moving on from Daniel Jones? Because you're not, again, you're not going to have a top draft pick. That's the thing with this again. Whereas if they win 8 and 9 games, which is going to save Daboll's job, and that's the biggest piece here. If they win enough games to save Daboll's job this year, they won't have a top draft pick again. And again, there's going to be teams at the top of the draft looking for quarterbacks. You don't think Tennessee is going to want a new quarterback? There's so many teams now that are still going to want a new quarterback, and you're going to be battling with those teams. Carolina is probably going to want to draft a quarterback again. All of a sudden, you're going to find yourself in the same predicament you found yourself in last year. So if Daboll coaches this team well enough to keep his job, he won't get the opportunity to draft another quarterback because they'll be too low in the draft. And if he doesn't coach the team well enough to save his job, then he'll be fired. So basically, and this is my point, are you going to take a mediocre NFL draft pick quarterback in the draft over Daniel Jones? No, because if you still have Daboll next year, you're not going to have a top draft pick. Whereas if you have Brian Daboll next year, right? Whereas if you lose enough games to have a top draft pick, rather, you won't have Daboll next year. I think it's pretty simple. I probably didn't explain it that well, but pretty simple. Joe Shane, and Brian Daboll are tethered and tied to Daniel Jones for the simple reason that if they win enough games with him to keep their jobs, they won't have a top pick in the draft. So they'll have to stick with Jones. And if they don't win enough games in the draft, or if they don't win enough games and they are high in the draft, they have a high draft pick to get a quarterback. I don't think Mara is going to let Daboll and Shane be the ones to make that pick. Simplified it. All right. The Niners are the team with the year from hell this year. I'm 100% certain of it. And we see this sometimes with the Super Bowl hangover. They haven't had the Super Bowl hangover the last couple of times they made it to the Super Bowl. This time they're having it. Injury after injury. I mean, they sign Ayuk, he gets hurt. Debo gets hurt. It just the season starts with CMC getting hurt. It's too much to overcome. But they're not last year's Phillies or last year's Eagles. The Eagles of last year, and think about this. The Eagles of last year that were 9-1, but everyone knew they were kind of frauds, is kind of the Kansas City Chiefs right now. I know they trade for DeAndre Hopkins, and that should help, maybe. He's kind of old. He's kind of washed. They need receivers. Patrick Mahomes' numbers are terrible. He has 7 touchdowns, 10 picks. He hasn't looked good at all this year. His numbers are way down passing yards wise, and they're 6-0. It's great, right? And if they didn't have Patrick Mahomes, and Patrick Mahomes wasn't so proven, which he is, he's a proven commodity. But if he wasn't, people would be talking about this team the way they talked about the Eagles last year. It's only because Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid have proven that they could turn it around and win games no matter what. But the games this year that they've had, that they've found ways to win on flukes at the end of the games and other teams just playing poorly and penalties and all those things getting called in their favor, all of a sudden it feels like this 6-0 Chiefs team, they are eerily similar to last year's 9-1 Eagles team. But 9-1, the 9-1 Eagles were easy to hate because you didn't like Jalen Hurts, because the head coach Nick Sirianni has a weird attitude. So all of a sudden it was really easy to hate that team and say that they're frauds. And then, oh, see, they're frauds when they ended up losing down the stretch and lost in the playoffs. This Chiefs team is on the same exact path as that Eagles team. They're winning games. They're 6-0. They don't look good at all doing it. And if it continues this way, nobody's going to say it because you like Mahomes, because you like Andy Reid, because you've seen Travis Kelce win a Super Bowl, because you've seen this defense. And you know that no matter what, they can turn it on. Even last year, they didn't look that great, and all of a sudden they turned it on. But don't kid yourself. This Kansas City Chiefs team is more similar to last year's 9-1 Eagles than they are to last year's Kansas City Chiefs. I'll tell you that right now. So last year's team turned it on. This team, I wouldn't be shocked if they didn't find a way to turn it on. We'll see if DeAndre Hopkins, an older wide receiver, again, changes that. I don't think he will. All right. Like, subscribe, share the podcast. If you're looking for tickets to go to an NFL game, you don't want to spend the kind of money that tickets cost these days. Tickets are insane. Go to SeatGeek.com. Use my code RamiLavi, first and last name, RAMILAVI, one word, and get $20 off your next purchase at SeatGeek. It's actually your first purchase. So what you can do is if you already have a SeatGeek account, make another one. Start a new email address. Just keep making new email addresses for SeatGeek, and every time you get $20 off. It's a great way to get $20 off your tickets every single time. First time you use it. So first time with that account, even if you are not technically a new user. If you're a new user on SeatGeek, even better, get $20 off your first purchase at SeatGeek using code RamiLavi. Till next time, like, subscribe, share the podcast. Appreciate you all for listening. See ya.